So this last one is, so here's my approach. When I get to like if I'm going to go out, I do a lot of fishing out at Six Lakes and Falcons Ledge in the spring because they ice off a lot sooner in the high mountains. And in the spring, that's when the bloodworms become active. And what they'll do, this is according to Phil Rowley, I've not seen it myself, but I've seen the effect of it, is that the larvae will come out of their homes in the mud and the gunk, and they'll move locations. So when they do that, obviously that's dinner bell for the fish. So if I'm going to early spring, Strawberry's another place that you'll do this at. Like if you go in on the west side of Strawberry Bay Marina, so like the actual bay, and you get back in there, it's a little bit shallower and it's muddy. That is killer chironomid action out in that area. So right after ice off, those bloodworms will be active. So the first thing I'll try to do when I'm fishing these areas is go deep. Fish close to the bottom, a foot or less from the bottom. And I'll fish either bloodworms or I'll fish darker bloodworm into pupa patterns. So that's what this one is.
Size 10?
This will be a size 10, yeah. So the size is going to be a 2.8 millimeter bead. And so this is a... So this is what I'm going after here. It is basically for when it's starting to turn from a bloodworm into a pupa. And so it's dark, there's not too much silver in it. So I'll lay a little bit of a red pencil body, and then I'll use that same Uniflex method for the ribbing. And then on this one I will add wing pads and no breathers. And this row, at least here that I've tied up, has .015 lead wire behind the bead. And part of the reason I don't use breathers or any other appendage is this is one I want to sink fast. So if I want a fly that sinks fast, I don't tie anything else on it. Pure materials that I can resin over and a bead, and it will just, boom, plummet. So that's what I'm going after here. Is this one that I can go out early in the season, or if it's early in the day, I can fish it a lot deeper, it'll sink super fast, and still look good and catch fish. So.
Do you want your bead to be black necessarily?
I do like it to be black. If you look at the naturals, all of their thorax areas are going to be black, with few exceptions. And there's that taper factor. The only thing that I may add to something like this, and in my other box I've got them all segmented out better, would be breathers, but we're not going to mess around with breathers. In fact, you probably don't need wing pads for this one, but I'll tie them in because I think it's a good technique to show you. So this is just black thread. You could probably use 140 denier if you wanted. I just use 70. With most of my chironomids, actually all of my chironomids, I'm using UTC because I can flatten it. If you're ever doing like quill bodies or wire bodies or anything that needs to have solid segmentation right on top of the thread, or even, you want to use a thread that can lay flat. And you probably can't see, yeah, you can see it. You see how it's twisted? I just barely tied on, the hook shank length, and it's already twisted. So you give that a counterclockwise spin until you can see it start to untwist. And also, as an added bonus, when you untwist it and it's laid flat, you can tie in your materials easier. So if you think about it, think of a rope that's twisted tightly and then trying to lash something onto a bar versus a flat webbing. What would be easier to wrap that and cinch it down? So it's going to be something that's wider. Same method here with the Uniflex. This is black. Another one that I'll use is they've got purple. And then I'll also use their, I want to say it's a claret color. It's a dark, actually brown. It is brown. To me it looks a little reddish, rust, but Those are the darker colors that I'll use for this style of pattern. So it's the same technique. I just tie that right on the top, 2 tight wraps, and then a couple, 3 locking wraps, and then I just come in here, pull it, and put it on. And then in this case, I'm going to grab hollow tinsel large, because the one disadvantage to large is a little bit harder to wrap, so you have to yank it.
It is.
Now I'll get back to the end and then just work my way forward.
So would you use brown or purple flexi floss on this?
This one's black flexi floss.
If you didn't have black, you had purple.
I'd use purple or brown, yep. Anything dark. Without fail, when I take samples from fish that I've caught on the bottom or near the bottom, they've either got bloodworms or they're got the darker color tint to them. Oh, and another interesting one that I've seen, I don't know who here has ever fished Matt Warner, but that lake is like Chironomid heaven. And there are a lot of pink. So they'll go from a darker red to almost a pink before they get silver when they pupate. So I do really well up there with pink. All right. So I even got kind of nerdy one time, and I took a lot of samples and I measured their thorax width and the end of their abdomen, and then I created a ratio against the length of their body. And I can't remember the number, but almost regardless of size, it was the same ratio. In other words, the taper. So the width of the butt section versus the thorax is about the same, regardless of the size and type. So that's why I always create a taper on my chironomids.
So you've got red tinsel and flexi floss type.
Yeah, that's it. So
that's
now,
a large red tinsel, right?
yeah, just again for me, if I hold it tight, I can cover more ground in fewer wraps. That's the thing with the large, you got to do a little bit of overlap so that you don't get little kinks that pop up. And I just wrap this right on up to just before the bead, because this is, we're not going to tie in any thorax of dubbing or anything. And then it's the same drill with the flexi or the uniflex. The first couple are going to be tight wraps, and then I just let the rotary kick in. See, like on this one, this one wanting to slide on me, so I just go over it until I get the right tension. And then by the time I'm at the thorax, there's like no tension on this. And you got to make sure you catch that good. So there's the body. So you notice the segments there, it kind of shows the red through. The nice thing is when you start to add a little bit of the resin, it'll sink down in and fill that the void between the wraps, and it actually makes it look more natural. So I probably could have gotten a little tighter on my wraps there, but not a huge deal. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to add actually add the resin at the end, because we're not going to do dubbing. And so now what I've got here is some orange or sunburst colored biots. And I will grab 2, and I'll strip them off one at a time. Like so. And now, if you go on YouTube or see instructional videos on chironomids, you'll see people tie these in 100 different ways. So there's nothing magical about the way I do it. I do it this way because I think it's easiest. So I'm going to hold the 2 biots between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to split the hook there, and then I'm going to switch hands. And so you'll notice now I've got these pointing. The hook's upside down, And I'm going to be right where my wraps left off. And what I'll do is I'm going to come up here and grab one soft wrap, and as you do that, the torque will carry those two pieces of those two buyouts together and form a V. See that? You don't really even have to try. As soon as you put that thread wrap on there, those buyouts want to suck up into that V shape. And so then, once I've got those in there, I'm going to come in and finish up the thorax. You don't want to get too close to the bead before you cut this off, but it does help to have super sharp scissors. And trim those off, and then I can finish covering this. Okay, so we've got our Chironomid wing buds tied in. And then what I'll do here is I just push them both forward, grab them with my other hand. Now there's some patterns, I have got a couple on our YouTube channel, where I'm actually pulling the bead, I'm pushing the bead back, and I'll pull these up and around the bead so that they'll create those wing pads around the bead. Like it actually looks more natural that way. But in this case, I'm not going to worry about that because I'm not going to tie them off in front. So what I'll do is I'll do a somewhat soft wrap and then another one tighten down, pulling kind of towards the bead. And then that just leaves those two there. And then with buyouts, if you've done a decent job and you hold it tight, you should be able to just tear that off. And you don't want to undo the wrap, so keep the tension on it, and you'll do the same on the other side. And then to conserve wraps, we'll just throw our whip finish in right here. Nice thing about finishing with the resin, I don't have to whip finish the heck out of it because it'll be all finished off with the resin. And so again, these are just little hot spots, little trigger for the fish. Most of the Chironomids that you see are going to have wing pads. So now I'm going to come in with my resin. More than enough there. And I always have a resin bodkin. And we'll just finish that out. Just kind of keeping the taper. And I just coat the whole thing. Now this has a really runny consistency, so if you're going to coat the whole thing and you kind of apportion it out here, you need to be quick with the light or keep it moving at least. And then we'll just zap it. And that's it. These are nice because I'm tying these to be quick to tie, but also quick to drop. And once you notice, once the resin's in there, it looks a lot more realistic, and the fish will eat it up. That's it. Okay. Any questions on Chironomids that I may not have answered?
So on this, it looked like you put the bead on backwards. So
You know,
small hole.
I might have, and it was not intentional.
Okay, so you want the bead on normal.
Yeah, I still do it that way. In
Yeah.
fact, yeah, I think you're right. This one was hard to tell, but yeah, it's definitely on backwards.
But you want the bead on normal.
I usually, I put the bead on it.
Okay.
Yep, for sure.
If you do them with like breathers out the front, do you find an advantage of having the bead on in reverse versus normal?
No, I can, in fact, I probably like it more because it will seat. So when you tie in the breathers and you've got that tie-in point, if you tied it in backwards, the bead, I think, would go too far up the breathers. Whereas if you're tying on the smaller hole in front, like I should have done there, but I couldn't because I couldn't see, I would have that can kind of stop right at the point where I tighten the breathers in, and they still remain splayed out.